All right, guys. One Eye Jack's here. My voice is a little whacked. I'm suffering from a cold, but we'll get through this. What I'm going to go over today is one of the finer points of the flat Earth story that Stanley Kubrick is trying to tell you. And I showed you the Icarus crater and the dome crater on Apollo 15, and then said, Kubrick told you it was a dome. Well, he actually told you a lot more than that. And some of it requires some thought and some thinking before you understand what he's trying to show you. And that's what this video is about. So, one of the first things I'm going to show you is Douglas Trumbull. Douglas Trumbull was a friend of Kubrick, and he hires him from the World's Fair. So let's watch this short clip, and I'll leave URLs for all these videos that I'll use in this particular one, and we'll begin with this one. And this is a gentleman that did a video on Kubrick's 2001 and how it was done. So let's watch this.
From the panoramas and racetrack betting to a technique that can be used for motion pictures? Well, in 1964, a short film titled To the Moon and Beyond premiered at the World's Fair in New York City. It was shot in Cinerama 360, which was a 70mm single film process using fisheye lenses
So,
and
fisheye
projected
lenses,
onto
remember
a
that.
domed screen. In attendance was Stanley Kubrick, who was getting ready to shoot his grand space opus. Now, Kubrick hired the special effects company behind To the Moon and Beyond to create some preliminary test shots for 2001. One of the special effects artists working at that company, a young
So
Douglas
this is the
Trumbull,
man
cold called
Trumbull.
Stanley Kubrick
Is,
and
what,
asked
you know,
to
he's a
work on
bull,
his
another
film.
bull.
Kubrick accepted, and Trumbull spent 2.5 years working on the special effects for 2001 Space Odyssey. Now, for the Stargate sequence, Trumbull was inspired by the work of animator John Whitney, who also worked on To the Moon and Beyond. John Whitney was the animator that worked with Saul Bass on the spiral graphics for Alfred Hitchcock's 1958 film Vertigo, which happens to be the first film to use a computer for animation.
Remember, we were
That
using computer
was
first. That's
a World
interesting.
War II anti-aircraft targeting computer, but still a computer. During the 60s, Whitney had been experimenting with leaving a camera shutter open for long durations while moving artwork around on motorized tables. Trumbull took Whitney's experiments and combined it with the slit scan concept. His approach was to put the slit outside of the camera. The camera was placed on a movable platform aimed at a 4-foot slit. Behind the slit was a wall of gel patterns on a moving table. When the shutter was released, the camera would dolly in towards the slit, while the gel
So this is
behind the
all the
slit would move from
Stargate
left
sequences
to right.
in the movie
After
2001.
each
We're done with the
60
slit
second
scan
exposure,
and this dolly.
the graphics on the gel would be
and,
advanced just slightly, creating the
Douglas
animation
Trumbull.
of flying through a Stargate made of light. A fitting process which blends the relationship between time and space for a scene where Dr. David Bowman is doing the same thing. And this method for creating slit scan effects would continue to see use in special effects for the next 30 years, including the Doctor Who intro.
Isn't that interesting?
Star Trek The Next Generation would also use
I believe
slit
it was
scan
used
techniques
in
for when
the
the
Natalie Wood
Enterprise
movie,
made the
too.
jump to warp speed. But once digital effects came into prominence, the painstaking slow slit scan technique fell by the wayside.
So there you have it. So Kubrick Kubrick hires Trumbull from the World's Fair. The reason he hires him is he projects a moonscape on the domed building. There's the domed building in the World's Fair. There's another shot of it. And he projects a moonscape using a fisheye. There are lots of domed buildings at the World's Fair, by the way. There's the IBM typewriter head. And then, of course, we have the Unisphere, which is a clue to that we were looking for the Mercator projection. So he hires him at the World's Fair because he projects a moonscape on a domed building. So there's another dome clue. You have the Polaris productions and all the other clues to flat Earth, the one-eyed jacks, and the Tycho magnetic anomaly. So Tycho Brahe the man that could prove we didn't live on a globe in 1500 something, he takes metal tubes and he points them at the stars, and he takes like 50 of them and he secures them in tripods. And he notes exactly what time the star passes through the center of the optical tube that he has. Because remember, the telescope didn't exist at this point. So he does this for like 50 stars, and then he waits a year and he does it again. And what does he find? All the stars pass through the same holes at the same times, proving parallax doesn't change, which is a huge, huge, huge problem. So Tycho Brahe is murdered, and his work is stolen by Kepler and Clavius, which we have the Tycho magnetic anomaly, which is Tycho Brahe crater, the largest crater on the moon. And you have the Clavius crater, which is, I love how Kubrick selects a spherical shape for the Clavius crater. So there's Clavius. He says the Earth's a globe in 1582. And we see the corona flushing Queens in Men in Black. We see the Apollo 13 Scotch or 3M brand duct tape. We see the carpet that's a 3D simulation. We see the Icarus and Dome craters on Apollo 15. We see little Alex and the tides changing. We see the gyro and it's not showing any. It's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't work. So these are all flat Earth clues here. The gyro, the tides. Okay, yeah, there's Dome crater, Icarus crater. So Icarus flew too high. And there's a bunch of the clues in the maps that we've gone through before. There's the Laurel corona in the 33 segment globe. So let's look at this. How would one communicate that there's no parallax in the night sky without actually saying there's no parallax in the night sky? How Kubrick did it was he did it with his actual missions to the moon. Missions to the moon were done in a studio with front screen projection, and one of the huge tells of front screen projection is the parallax in the projected backgrounds never changes because it's not real parallax, it's a projected background. So this video here, which I'm going to include underneath this one, shows you exactly what you should be seeing and what you are seeing. Everything beyond that orange line in the middle of the screen is a screen. It's not real. It's like pictures in a book, Danny. So if you watch them carefully, you can see that they never move. They never show any parallax change. Just like the 3D carpet in the overlook. It looks like it's 3D, but it never shows any real parallax. So the backgrounds in the Apollo missions show no real parallax, and this illustrates that you can see the foreground rocks are moving. They're showing real parallax. But everything beyond that red line in the back is not real. It's projected. And here they've drawn a red vertical line on the rocks, and you can see that they never move in the backgrounds. That's impossible. The only way you could get that is if the backgrounds are projected. So this is a very clever, very, very clever clue. Because when we look at the stars in the night sky, they never change, they don't behave like a real 3D field of stars. They behave like a projection, exactly like the moon scenes and the moon projections from the moon missions. So one of the big tells for the moon mission is the parallax is all wrong in the backgrounds for the moon missions. Well, one of the big tells for the flat Earth is the parallax is all wrong for the night sky. We see minor parallax changes between the moon, the sun, and the stars. And the problem with that is the moon is very close, and the stars are very far away, and the sun it's somewhere in between. And so we should see three different parallax values for those three groups of objects, and every star should have different parallax. So what should the night sky look like? I mean, if we really lived on a globe, hurtling through the galaxy with stars at all different distances from us. This is what we should see. No, this is what we see, I should say. Right here is what we see in this video. And in a minute, he's going to show you what you should see, which you don't see. So the night sky behaves exactly like the background in the Apollo missions. There's no real parallax in the night sky because it's projected on a dome. And I know this sounds crazy. See now, that's what a real 3D field of stars should look like. Every night they should be in a different position. They never are. The closer stars don't move faster than the farther stars. The closer sun doesn't move slower than, or the farther sun doesn't move slower than the closer moon. None of it makes any sense because it's not real. It's like pictures in a book, Danny. It's a projection on a dome. And, you know, like I said at the beginning of this video, you're going to have to do some thinking to understand this. But you can see, and people have measured the star trails. So you measure the star trail to Alpha Centauri and say it's 15 inches. And then you measure the star trail to the moon, which should be very much different than the star trail to Alpha Centauri. And it's the same. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Then you have Tycho's experiment where he puts these metal rods on tripods, aims them at a star, waits a year, a whole full year later, checks the positions again and the times, and they pass right in the center of the reticule. So that's a problem. So they didn't know what to do. So they killed them, and they brushed it over. And that was what Christopher Clavius' real job was, is to obfuscate the flat Earth and create the ball, and that's what they did. And Kubrick's job throughout all the moon missions, the only objective was to reinforce the fact you live on a ball, which you don't. And he was so clever. I mean, to use the actual fakery technique to give you a clue as to what the real subject is just genius. And I wanted to end that. It's something I hadn't mentioned in earlier videos, and it's more of a subtle thing. You know, it isn't one clue, it isn't two clues, it's a dozen clues. And when you add them all together, you end up with we live under a dome. And that's interesting. You know, I think Kubrick wanted us to know that. And that's it, guys. And if you learned something in this, which I almost guarantee you did, thumb it up, or even better yet, sub it. And that's it, guys. Have a great night.